Hello and welcome back to the RinkMasters podcast. My name is Tyler Kroom. I'm your host today. On the other side of the screen here is my co-host Noah. Today we're going to be going over our Prince George Cougars review heading into the 2020-21 season. That looks like it could happen. We'll see how it goes with COVID-19, but more of that on the Shawsees report with Noah. I'll pass it on to you, man.
All right. Thank you, Tyler. So there's a lot of hockey news in the last few days in Prince George. The most saddening of which for many hockey fans is that the city decided to close arenas indefinitely. They were originally scheduled to open on August 4th. The city shut that down, citing budgetary and precautions, just to shut it down, right? To try to keep people safe and to stop the city from going into severe money trouble. To solve that issue, they have announced they are having a budget meeting or a emergency financial meeting about the COVID-19, about what's happening with the pandemic. That's supposed to take place on July 27th, and they are going to be directly addressing the reopening of the arenas in Prince George. On that note, the Prince George Cougars announced that training camp should be starting on September 15th, with the season opener scheduled right now for October 2nd. Again, that isn't set in stone. There's a lot that depends on, but that is the hope at this time. And the final big news is that the Spruce Kings and the BCHL have announced that they hope to be starting their season at the start of December. So great news for most of that for Prince George hockey fans. But even on the subject of the arenas, I don't think there's too much cause for concern, as they've said that it's coming up right on the 27th. They're going to solve that, and they should have arenas hopefully by the start of September. All right, with the news covered, let's start the Cougars breakdown here. So best place to start is with broad organizational information for those of you who don't know. So the Cougars relocated to Prince George from Victoria in 1994. They played their first season at the Prince George Coliseum. After that, they moved to what was then the Prince George Multiplex and is now the CN Center in 1995. The CN Center was a brand new, beautiful facility boasting a capacity of just under 6,000 people, and it has 14 luxury suites. The current ownership group for the Prince George Cougars is Edge Pro Entertainment. They bought the Cougars in 2014 from the Broadskis. And the Cougars won the division title in 2016-2017, being their only major accolade as an organization. Covered, let's move on to hockey operations. Head coach and GM of the Prince George Cougars is Mark Lamb. He's been with the team now for a number of years. He's just really started to implement his own philosophies, especially in the coaching department. And the team, especially towards the end of this past season, really did start to pick it up. And we're putting pressure on the final wild card spot. Assistant coach is Jason Smith. He's been with the Cougars now. I believe this is his first season, if I remember correctly. And then director of scouting is Bob Simmons. He's been with the organization for a number of years, and his good scouting has led to a number of the top prospects now being a part of the Cougars organization. The director of player development is Steve O'Rourke, and the goaltending coach is Taylor Dakers. All right, Tyler, now that we have some general organizational knowledge, let's move on to the Cougars' top prospects.
All right, so I've got a list of some of the top prospects we have here heading into this season and next season. Bob Simmons and his team has done a really good job at collecting a good pool of really quality prospects, and right now leading the pack is Riley Heidt. What else is there to say? I think Riley Heidt, along with Braden Yeager and Connor Bedard, were, again, some of the top players in the country leading into their draft. And so I think Riley Height's going to be a very entertaining player for us to watch in the next coming years. Following him, we have Caden Brown, Riker Singer, two other really impressive goal scorers that we got in the first round in this last Bantam draft. And right after that, Bauer Demansky. I think we bring in Bauer Demansky we should be expecting a really steady two-way defender who's going to help be able to move the puck up the ice to help out our offense. Now we got our 04s. We have Cohen, Zemer, and Keaton Duhaniuk, followed by Gronick and Brinson. What I like here is we're going to have Zemer. He's going to very likely make the team this year and hopefully provide some offensive help. And Keaton Duhaniuk, much like Bauer Demansky, is going to be a very strong two-way defender who's going to help bring the puck up and support the offense. And then Gronick, again, another player that I think is going to be very effective offensively as he just starts to develop and become more of an established Western Hockey League player. And we look at Jaron Brinson, another very steady two-way defender. He just had a really good year last year. I believe it was midget. So yeah, again, really excited to see how these prospects develop. And going forward, I think the Cougars have a lot to be excited about.
Absolutely. Now that we have their top prospects covered, who are some of the top players for this season for the Cougars? And by that, I mean the most important. Who do they need to take the biggest step, or who is there already to take that step?
Well, I think first off, we've got to look at Taylor Gauthier. Like this last season, he was the backbone of our team and a big reason why we were able to win a lot of our games. So he's going to be heading into his last year of NHL draft eligibility. So I'd expect him to really bring it. I think this will be Taylor Gauthier's best season yet in the Western Hockey League. Following him, now we have Chicago Blackhawks prospect Cole Moberg. He was spectacular last year, and he really helped drive the play from the back end. I'd expect him to build upon that this year, and I think really establish himself as a top defenseman in the Western Hockey League as he's looking to impress the Chicago Blackhawks and try and move up their prospect depth ranks. Following up next, I want to look at Ethan Brown. I think Ethan Brown, he's shown a lot of flashes to be an elite top six centerman in the Western Hockey League. Injuries have really stunted some of his progress. So if he can stay healthy this year, I'd be keeping him on my watch. And looking in, I want to take a look at Philip Kofer. He had a pretty solid rookie season after coming over from the Czech Republic. He will be turning 19 this year, so he is going to be a year older. He's going to be a little bit more developed, and I think if he can bring more of his scoring ability up to par here in the Western Hockey League on that potential first line, I think the offense here looks quite good. I also want to look at Tyson Upper. He really started to click a little bit last year, and we started to see him get a little bit more creative offensively. And so I think if we can get that from him this year, that he's going to – I would expect maybe, 32 points from him, Noah?
Yeah, I believe that was what our projection for him was. I think he can hit a bit higher than that, but I don't think it would be wrong to expect about 32, 34 points from him. That's certainly reasonable.
Definitely. And I think another player to look out for here is Elijah Kalina. This will be his last year in the league. He's got the ability, and I'd like to see him definitely take that step forward if we want to help develop this team, and we got to fill the shoes here of Vladislav Mikulchuk and Josh Mazer. They're going to leave two big holes on the offense, so Kalina is a guy that we need to step up and lead this young core group of Cougars forwards.
Yeah, for sure. I had a few of the same players. You went much more in depth. I just chose the main player from each position. Cole Moberg, again, he was excellent last year. And I think this year he can really establish himself as one of the best defensemen in the entire WHL. He put up 37 points in a shortened season, and that's in only 58 games. So I don't think it's unreasonable to expect he could hit 50 points next season, assuming that the Cougars are very strong defensively. So with that in mind, I think he's really going to be a key player for them this season. Moving on down again, Ethan Brown, injury-stricken. He's had a bit of a tough time with that, but he still put in a solid 19 points in 36 games. And if he gets to play top-line minutes with the wingers that we have in, I believe it's Philip Kofer and Karkainen coming in, I think that he can certainly push that point total up by quite a bit and could turn into a very solid centerman. Then again, Taylor Gauthier. This is his final NHL draft eligible season. I think he's going to be on fire this year personally. I think he's really going to be driven to really impress people. And with an improved Cougars team, I certainly think that more people are going to take notice. I know as a Prince George Cougars fan in recent years, that has been really frustrating to see how underrated Gauthier has been. So I think this is finally the year where he really establishes himself as a top junior goaltender.
For sure. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if Johnny Karkainen can fit in nicely here and the season starts. I want to see what the transition period will be. You know, sometimes European players that come over and there can be that rough transition to North American hockey. So, you know, again, we said before, Mark Lamb has had a lot of success with Finnish players. So the transition period may not be as noticeable, actually. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. I think it's going to be very exciting.
All right, so Tyler and I each decided to make a projected lineup for what we think the Cougars will look like this season. So Tyler, why don't you run us through your lineup here?
Yeah, so I've made my lineup here, and it's going to be, it's kind of both what I would expect the roster to look like, and then personally how I think it should look. So this top line here, let's start there. Left wing, we have Philip Kofer. You know, I'm expecting him to, again, build off of his rookie season. I think he's going to be more used to North American hockey, so we should expect a lot more consistency from him this year. And centering this line is going to be Ethan Brown. Again, if he's healthy, I think he's going to be one of our top players. And I know last year I've noticed he was one of our best setup guys when on the ice. His vision is definitely really solid, so we'll see if he can bring that and help set up Kofer for some nice goals this year. And on that right line, I expect Johnny Karkainen to take it. I think personally he's going to fit in right away. I think he's going to fit Lamp's system, and this is going to be just a very entertaining line to watch. Now, forward line too, I've got Tyson Upper on the left wing, and I actually have Elijah Colina on his right wing, being centered by Connor Bowie. Connor Bowie took some big steps last year, and I was really impressed with his ability in the face-off circle. I think that's going to be a big reason as to why he should be on that second line for center. And I was also actually quite impressed with some of the goals he was starting to score. He definitely started to find his rhythm in the offensive department. So I think this is going to be a good fit. And his ceiling should be higher than Colina's because he is going to have 2 more years in the league, whereas Colina, this is his last season. So they're going to need someone primed to take over in the centerman position for the season after. Now on the third line, on the left wing, I have Johnny Hooker. On the right side, I have Mitch Koner. And at center, I have Craig Armstrong. He was the 9th overall pick 2 drafts ago, and I think putting him in on that third line will increase his minutes and to help along with developing him into a top player in the Western Hockey League, and that's what the Cougars really need out of Armstrong. And then looking down to the fourth line, I've got one of our top prospects, Kyron Gronick, fitting in on the left side. On the right side, I've got one of our top prospects, Colin Ziemer, sliding in. And on the center there, I've got Brendan Boyle. He was another one of our top face-off takers last season, and I think his 2 very strong defensive abilities going to help be able to provide a lot of room and ice for Ziemer and Gronick to really just play offensive. And then on the extras here, I have Blake Eastman, who was a rookie this last season, and he looked quite good, but I don't think he took the steps necessarily to really put himself ahead of Ziemer on the right side. Now I've got Davin Griffin. He was an extra last year, so I'm going to put him in as an extra this year. Now I actually have Fisher O'Brien as well as one of my extras. I think, he's a Prince George boy. He had a really good year with the Caribou Cougars this year. And it'll be interesting to see if the Cougars bring him on for full-time this year. Now we're going to look at the defense. Our first pair, it's going to be Jack Sander and Cole Moberg. Jack Sanders plays a very heavy defensive game, and he's very responsible in his own end, which gives Cole Moberg the flexibility to make the offensive plays that he needs to, right? And on that second line here, we're going to have Majid Kadora, who looked really good coming over from Saskatoon in the Rhett Reinhardt trade last year, and I think that's a good fit for him. On the right side, he's going to be paired with Ethan Sampson. He looked really good as a rookie last year, and he got some power play looks. He's very poised, very, very good vision. He's a good skater. I'm actually really excited to see what he brings to the table this year. Now for the defensive line 3, again, another top prospect, Keaton Johaniuk on the left side. He's making the jump in. And then on the right side, Aiden Reeves. He looked very good for the Caribou Cougars this year, and his call-ups to play with the Cougars in those games, he didn't look out of place. I think he's going to come in and he's going to be a very responsible defender for us this year. And then I also have one of our prospects, Jaron Brinson, making the jump into the Western Hockey League this year, and I think he's going to fill in as that 7th defender. And then in net, it's pretty self-explanatory. Taylor Gauthier and Tyler Brennan. They're not going to lose their spots. It's just not going to happen.
Definitely not. I mean, next year we could see a bit of a shakeup, of course, with Dylan Johnson. He was just drafted in the U.S. draft this year. So we'll see what happens with that. Now, I guess it's my turn for my lineup. Now, something to bear in mind with my lineup, looking through the roster, I was really impressed with the Cougars center depth. It was so good. I wasn't entirely sure how to build my roster after the first line. So let's see what I got here. On the top line, I have Kofer, centered by Brown, and then I have Karkinen on the other side. I do think that Karkinen will step in and he'll be very good. I also think that Ethan Brown, if he stays healthy, will be able to really cement himself in that top line position. And I do think that Kofer, if he can really keep up with how well he played last year, I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility that he could be the top line player this year for the Cougars. So that's how I have my first line set up. Moving down the roster a little bit, I have upper on the left wing, centered by Kalina, and then on the right wing, I have Zemer. Now, at the start of the season, this is how I see it. Now, I don't necessarily know if that's how it's going to stick. I really do think that they're going to try to give Zemer some good looks. He has been a scorer at the lower levels, and especially since the Cougars very much lacked scoring last year, I really think that this could happen where they'll give Zemer some looks higher up the roster. So again, this could very much change. And the second and third line is where I had the most trouble here. So I had Bowie centering the third line with Hooker and Koner on his wings. I could see Kalina stepping up onto the second line, either centering it or on the wing. I could see Koner potentially moving up onto the right wing of the second line. I just see the second and third line as very interchangeable for the Cougars this year. And then on the fourth line, I have Blake Eastman centered by Armstrong, and then I have Boyle on the other side. Again, this could very much change. I think the Cougars are a very deep team this year with players who could all make a big step forward. So again, we'll see what happens, but this is, I think, what their roster is going to look like, especially at the start of the season. Moving on to the defense, the top defensive pairing, I have Sander and Moberg. They both had great seasons last year playing as defensemen. I think they were both two of the highest scoring players for the Cougars. So I could they're not going to lose their places on the top defensive pairing. That's going to stay the same. So
going to stay there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the second defensive pairing, I have Kadora and Dohaniuk. Like Zemer, I think they're going to try to give Dohaniuk some looks on a higher defensive pairing. We'll see how he does. He was very highly rated prospect, so I wouldn't be surprised, especially at the start of the season, if that's where they had him. And then if not, he'll drop down onto the third pairing, probably switching out Samson, probably turning out to be the same lines as Tyler. But on my third line, I have Reeves and Samson. Reeves, again, I thought he was very good last year too in his looks and with the Cougars, and with the Caribou Cougars, he was excellent as well. So the defense, I think, is definitely a place to be very positive in the coming years for the Cougars. And then in the crease, it's pretty set in stone, I think. Like Tyler said, Gauthier and Brennan, I don't think either of them are – I think they both know their roles. I think Brennan will be trying to push Gauthier a little bit more this season, but I certainly don't think that Gauthier is going to be pushed out of the crease. I mean, they were both called up to the Canada camps, so that's very positive if you're a Cougars fan. And if you're a management and the players, like, that's a very positive thing to have both your goalies go to a Team Canada camp. So,
yeah, well, it's definitely going to be a very competitive crease.
yeah.
From what I've been understanding from Gauthier and Brennan, they're both extremely competitive guys, right? And so, yeah, it'll be really good to see. They're going to push each other this year. And, yeah, it's going to be fun to watch if you're a Cougars fan.
Yeah, and then as my roster bubble players who I think could make it onto the team potentially, but I'm not sure, I have Gronick. Again, I think he was a very good prospect. I think he could push his way into the team. I also have Jaron Brinson on defense. Could absolutely see him pushing his way in. And then I also have Fisher O'Brien. I think all three of these players can push their way into the roster. We'll see what happens. Like I said, I think this Cougars team is very deep, so they can very much interchange on their lower lines, but below the top line. So we'll see what happens, but I think this is very good if you're a Cougars fan to see that so much versatility within the roster. Yeah, so Tyler, what do you think the Cougars need to accomplish this season for it to be considered successful?
Yeah, so this year it's going to be interesting. Last year, goaltending was spectacular. You don't really need to talk about that too much. Defensively, they were good. They couldn't score any goals. I think that's going to be the biggest question mark. And I think what the Cougars need to work on is putting pucks into the net. If they can put more pucks in the net, they're going to be a playoff team guaranteed. If they can't find their offense this year, then I don't think they can make the playoffs. And a lot of people don't know me. Like, I'm a diehard Cougars fan, so sometimes I can be a bit biased. So I'm trying my best to not be here. I would say their goal this year should be to first start finding their offense, start filling the net more than they did last year, and then also to make the playoffs. I think they need to make the playoffs this year. I think those are some two very important goals.
Yeah, so again, I think that too. I think the Cougars need to push for the playoffs, and I think they need to push to plateau 200 goals. I think they only had in the 140s when the season ended this year, and unfortunately, as much as I love the Cougars, that's just not acceptable if you're trying to push for the playoffs, right? You got to know if you're on that team that you got to score a bit more. And I think that if with good defense again this year, with good goaltending, they just need that little bit more from the offense, and then they can be a playoff team. Like, even at the end of the season, they started putting in a few more goals. They started really pressing teams. They started scoring, and they were pushing for the last playoff spot. It wasn't inconceivable that in their last few games, they'd be able to close that point gap and actually sneak in. So with that said, I again, more goal scoring and making the playoffs. Those are extremely important. And another thing to add on to that is they need to try to find ways to give their younger prospects looks, right? Like they need to do that. Like they've had such good drafting. They have such a good prospect pool. Unfortunately, for your prospect pool to be considered great, they need to be able to make the team, right? So if they can get some good looks, especially looking ahead, not just to this season, but next season, I think their offense will certainly improve remarkably. So we'll see if they can even push that boundary this year, but especially next year, I think they're going to be excellent in offense. So,
well, and that's totally it. Like, I know they did give Ethan Sampson some really good looks last year, second pair for most of the games that I saw, and then that second power play in it was really awesome. And yeah, again, like if they can push and hit 200 goals this year, that's excellent, because then you look forward to when Riley Height, Caden Brown, and Singer make the jump potentially the year after. That's so positive.
yeah.
I think that's really awesome. And again, for this year, like we already know that our goaltending depth, like they're gonna give the Cougars a fighting chance every game. So yeah, if they can fill the net, then they're good to go.
Now, where do we think the Cougars will actually fall on those metrics. Like being critical and trying not to be overly critical, but also not ridiculously positive. Realistically, where do we think the Cougars will fall on those goals?
I'd like to see them. Okay, I think they're going to go anywhere from like 196 to 200 goals this year. I think that's roughly where they're going to land.
Yeah, and do you think they'll hit the playoffs?
I think they will. I mean, they were so close this year. Assuming they can build off of the momentum that they ended the season with at the start of this next season, it's not an outlandish thought to think that they would make the playoffs.
Yeah, and I agree. I think the Cougars are. It's going to be a struggle to hit 180 goals. I think they can do it. The reason I say it's a little bit questionable, they lost Josh Mazer in the offseason, right? So as much as they do have good young players coming into the roster, they have Karkinen. None of them are proven at the WHL level. So I do think they can hit 180 goals, but losing Josh Mazer is certainly going to be a bit of a hit in that regard. And do I think they can make the playoffs? I do. I think it'll be interesting because we're not entirely sure what it's going to look like with the U.S. division this year. So depending on what happens with that, I do think the Cougars can make it, but it's especially this year, it was the BC division was very tight compared to the U.S. division. When I was looking at the standings, it was almost the U.S. teams and then the BC division teams in the standings. So I think the Cougars will certainly be able to push for that playoff spot. And again, I don't know what's happening with the U.S. team, so the Western Conference could be a little bit interesting this season.
Yeah, COVID-19 could definitely change the way the season's played. I don't think it's crazy to think we could play without the U.S. division this year. We got to take it day by day.
Yeah. With that being said, this is certainly a fun episode to put together. It was a lot of fun researching the Cougars prospects and who they have in the pool and making our predictions and stuff. Next week, we have Corey Cunningham on. He is the Prince George Spruce King star, local fan favorite. It's going to be great to have him on. Looking forward to that. We hope you are too. That being said, thank you for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and like our videos so you can keep seeing them. And then if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure that you subscribe as well so that you can keep listening to our podcast. Yeah, thank you. Have a great week.